I kept glancing at the clock, my fingers tapping rhythmically against the side of my coffee cup. The party was in full swing at a buddy's place, with laughter bouncing off the walls, glasses clinking every few seconds, and some mellow indie tunes playing faintly in the background. Everyone seemed to be having a great time, well, everyone except Lucas. My husband had parked himself in the far corner of the couch, clutching a beer like it was his last lifeline. He wasn't even pretending to care about the game on the TV, the one we were supposedly here to watch. Usually, he'd be the guy cracking sarcastic jokes or placing silly bets just to get a rise out of people. But tonight? Nothing. He had this distant, zoned-out look in his eyes that made me want to grab his shoulders and shake him back to reality. What the hell's his problem? I thought as I took another sip of my drink. This wasn't like him, not in public, anyway. Sure, at home, he'd occasionally go quiet after a tough day, but this? This was embarrassing. "Hey, babe, you okay?" I asked, keeping my tone casual as I perched on the armrest next to him. Lucas blinked up at me, as though he hadn't even noticed I was there. "Yeah," he muttered, his voice low. "Just tired." I rolled my eyes. "Tired? Come on, Lucas. Everyone's here to unwind. Join the conversation, crack a joke or two. You used to be the fun one, remember?" He didn't respond, just kept staring down at his beer. It was like talking to a brick wall. My patience, already running on fumes, finally snapped. "Are you serious right now?" "Man up, Lucas," I blurted out, louder than I'd meant to. The whole room went quiet. All eyes were suddenly on us. I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. "Kidding. You know I'm joking," I said quickly, but the damage was done. Lucas didn't laugh. His face turned stony, his expression colder than I'd ever seen it. Without a word, he placed his beer on the table, stood up, and walked out of the room. The sound of the door clicking shut was louder than the party itself. I froze, my cheeks burning as everyone around me tried to act like nothing had happened. Someone cracked a joke to lighten the mood, but it fell flat. I managed to force out a laugh, but inside, I was boiling. "What the hell is his problem?" I muttered under my breath. It was just a joke. God, he needs to grow a thicker skin. Still, no matter how much I tried to brush it off, the look he gave me before leaving wouldn't leave my head. It wasn't just anger, it looked like hurt, and it gnawed at me in a way I couldn't shake. The drive home was painfully quiet. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and my eyes kept flicking toward the empty passenger seat. Lucas's seat. Normally, he'd be there, maybe sulking but at least present. But tonight, he'd disappeared. No text, no call, nothing. I figured he just needed time to cool off, probably taking one of his long walks or a drive to clear his mind. Typical Lucas. Fine. Sulk all you want, I muttered as I pulled into the driveway. See if I care. But later that night, lying alone in bed, the house felt bigger, emptier somehow. And I hated how much I noticed he wasn't there. By the next day, the irritation had morphed into something else, unease. Morning came and went, then the afternoon. Still no sign of Lucas. By evening, I was stuck in a loop of second-guessing. Should I call him? Should I apologize? But for what? I hadn't done anything wrong, had I? Finally, my phone buzzed, and relief flooded through me when I saw his name on the screen. I answered fast, trying to sound calm. "About time," I said. "Where are you?" "I need some space," he replied, his voice flat, almost emotionless. I blinked, caught completely off guard. "Space? What are you even talking about? Space for what?" "For me, Anna," he said, and there was something in his tone that made my stomach twist. "I need to figure some things out." I scoffed. Figure what out? You're acting like I committed some huge crime. I made a joke, Lucas. A joke. Don't you think you're blowing this way out of proportion? The silence on the other end stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable, then he let out a sigh so heavy it felt like it might knock the wind out of me. His voice, sharper now, cut through the silence. This isn't just about the joke, Anna. It's everything. The joke was just the last straw. My chest tightened, but my pride flared up immediately. Oh, so now it's all my fault? I shot back, the words bitter on my tongue. You're really going to dump all this on me? I'm saying, Lucas replied, his voice taut, like he was holding something back, that I've been carrying the weight of this marriage for years. And I'm tired. I can't keep doing it, not when you don't even notice. Carrying us? I laughed, the sound hollow and harsh. Wow, okay, Lucas. That's rich. I'm the one handling the bills, the house, everything. And you? You just sit there with your moody silences and little pity parties. That's not fair, he snapped, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. Do you even hear yourself, Anna? Do you ever stop to think about how your words or your actions affect me? I've been trying. For years, I've been trying. And you? You just keep taking, and never giving anything back. His words stung more than I wanted to admit, but I refused to let it show. Oh, poor Lucas, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Always the victim. Maybe if you actually spoke up every now and then, we wouldn't be in this mess. There was a long, tense silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter but colder, like ice. I have spoken up, Anna. You just don't listen. And with that, the call ended. I stared at the phone in my hand, my fingers trembling slightly. I wanted to be furious, to let the anger consume me. But instead, I felt something else, something harder to pin down. Was it guilt? No. That couldn't be it. Could it? The days that followed blurred together in a monotonous loop. I buried myself in the chaos of school drop-offs, answering endless emails, and folding laundry that never seemed to stop piling up. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the hollow ache of Lucas's absence lingered, like a dark cloud that wouldn't lift. At night, the bed felt colder, emptier. And the kids, they weren't blind to what was happening. They asked why Dad hadn't been home for dinner, their innocent faces full of confusion. I mumbled some weak excuse about work, but I could tell they didn't buy it. By the weekend, frustration had taken over. When Lucas didn't show up for our youngest's soccer game, a game he'd never missed before, something inside me snapped. After the game, while the kids were preoccupied with snacks and their friends, I stepped away and called him. He picked up on the fourth ring, his voice guarded. Anna. Don't Anna me, I said, the sharpness in my tone unmistakable. Where the hell were you? Your son was looking for you out there. There was a pause, followed by another one of those deep, exhausting sighs. I told you. I need space. Space? I shot back, my voice rising. Oh, so now space means ditching your kids? Real classy, Lucas. I didn't abandon them, he said firmly, though his tone was clipped. I'm trying to figure things out, about me, about us. For us? I let out a bitter laugh. That's funny, Lucas. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot more like you're just running away. I'm not running away, he said, his voice finally breaking its measured tone. I'm stepping back because I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. Pretending? I snapped, throwing my free hand in the air even though he couldn't see it. Give me a break, Lucas. All I've ever done is keep this family afloat while you sit there playing the victim in your little pity parties. That's exactly your problem, Anna, Lucas said, his voice suddenly calm, but sharp enough to slice through my defenses. You think everything is about you. Your stress. Your struggles. Have you ever stopped to think about what I might be dealing with? What you're dealing with? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, please, Lucas. Enlighten me. What exactly are you carrying that's so heavy? He didn't bite. Instead, his voice dropped, quieter but somehow heavier. You don't get it, do you? You don't see how you chip away at me, day after day. Every sarcastic remark, every time you dismiss something serious with a laugh, every time you expect me to fix your messes, it's exhausting, Anna, Lucas said, his tone firm but weary. I opened my mouth, ready to fire back, but his words struck too close to home. The sting of truth made me defensive instead. So, that's it? I shot back, my voice rising. You're giving up? You're just done with us? He hesitated before answering, his voice softer now but still heavy with frustration. I don't want to give up, he admitted. But I'm at my breaking point. I've tried to tell you, tried to show you, but you don't listen. And now? I don't know if I've got anything left to give. His words hung in the air, each one landing like a ticking clock, loud and unrelenting. I swallowed hard, the weight of what he was saying pressing down on me. For the first time in years, it hit me, I might actually lose him. That realization scared me more than I wanted to admit. But instead of saying what I felt, instead of apologizing, I did what I always did. I deflected. Fine, I said, my voice tight. If you're so tired of me, maybe you should just go. For a split second, I thought he might argue, might push back. But he didn't. All he said was, maybe I should. And just like that, the call ended. I stood there, staring at my phone, feeling a hollow emptiness creep into my chest. I couldn't even decide how I felt, angry? Sad? Something else entirely? All I knew was that the ground beneath me felt a little less solid. By Monday morning, my frustration had been replaced by something worse, doubt. Lucas's words played on a loop in my mind, over and over, until they started to wear down my certainty. I'd been so sure I was in the right, but now? I wasn't so sure. Had I pushed him that far? Was I really the one at fault here? I tried to shake it off as I packed the kids' lunches, but my hands were trembling as I spread peanut butter on slices of bread. I hated this feeling, the gnawing possibility that, maybe, just maybe, Lucas had been right. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. Lucas. His name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, my heart stopped. I stared at it for what felt like forever before I finally answered. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual, even though I'd been obsessing over this moment for days. Hey, he replied. His voice was calmer now, but there was still a distance to it. Can we talk? I hesitated, the unease creeping back. Talk? Like, right now? Yeah, he said. There's a coffee shop on Main. Can you meet me there? Fine, I agreed, though my stomach churned with nerves. I'll be there. I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, but Lucas was already sitting at a corner table, both hands wrapped around a mug. He looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen him. His usual sharp posture was gone, replaced by a slump that made my chest tighten in a way I didn't want to acknowledge. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his expression was unreadable. Hey, I said quietly as I slid into the seat across from him. He nodded, but he didn't smile. Thanks for coming. Yeah, well, I said, forcing a casual tone. Not like I had much of a choice. You kind of left things hanging. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, I guess I did. Silence followed, the kind that felt heavy and awkward. I wanted to fill it, to say something, anything, but before I could, Lucas broke it. Do you even realize how much you've hurt me, Anna? He asked, his voice quiet but steady. Do you even see it? His words blindsided me. What are you talking about? I asked, blinking at him. Hurt you? Lucas, you're acting like I've been some kind of monster. I've been the one holding everything together while you've been off in your little pity party. His expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't see it. See what? I shot back, my voice rising defensively. You think that because you manage the day-to-day stuff, you've got a free pass to say or do whatever you want, he said, leaning forward slightly. But it doesn't work like that. Oh, I'm sorry, I said, my tone sharp and bitter. I didn't realize my occasional slip-ups were such a massive burden for you. Maybe if you spoke up more instead of brooding, we wouldn't be in this mess. Lucas leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. His expression was calm, but his voice had an edge. I have spoken up, Anna, he said. Plenty of times. Plenty of times, Lucas said firmly. But every time I try, you brush me off or laugh it away. Do you even realize how humiliating it feels when you make a joke about me in front of our friends? Or when you throw everything I do back in my face like it's nothing? It was a joke, I shot back, my voice rising defensively. A stupid joke. You're seriously making this into a bigger deal than it is. This isn't about just one joke, Anna, Lucas replied, his tone sharp and unyielding. It's about years of this. Years of me holding everything together while you act like I'm nothing more than a safety net. That's not fair, I protested, though my voice faltered. I've done my best, Lucas. I've tried. Have you? He asked, his words cutting straight through me. Because all I see are excuses. Every time I bring up a problem, you deflect. Every time I try to have a real conversation, you twist it around until I'm the one at fault. I can't keep doing this, Anna. The weight of what he said settled in my chest like a stone, heavy and suffocating. For once, I didn't have a comeback. I just stared at him, my throat tightening around the words I wanted to say. So, what are you saying? I finally asked, my voice unsteady. That you're done? You're giving up? I don't know, he admitted, running a hand through his hair, his frustration clear. I want to believe we can fix this. But I need to see something change, Anna. I need to know you're willing to try. Because right now, it feels like I'm the only one who's been trying. I opened my mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped me cold. He looked worn out, like he was carrying the weight of 100 fights. And in that moment, it hit me like a gut punch, he wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't bluffing. He was serious. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I don't want to lose you, Lucas. Then stop pushing me away, he said simply. The days after that meeting at the coffee shop were strange. Lucas hadn't come back home, but he wasn't entirely gone either. He'd send texts about the kids, the bills, and other practical things, but not once did he bring up us. It was like he'd become a shadow, present but not really there. At first, I tried convincing myself this was just a temporary phase. He'd cool off, come back, and everything would fall back into place. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't something I could sweep under the rug. Not this time. One evening, I was scrolling through my phone on the couch when I came across an old photo of us. It was from a beach trip I'd nearly forgotten about, both of us grinning like idiots, sunburned and carefree. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to be those two people. And then it hit me, sharp and cold. I had changed. We had changed. But instead of growing together, I'd been so wrapped up in my own frustrations that I hadn't noticed Lucas slipping further and further away. The next weekend, I decided enough was enough. I couldn't just sit in limbo anymore. I picked up the phone and called Lucas, my heart racing as it rang. He answered, his tone cautious. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied, my voice quick and nervous. "I want to talk. Face to face. About us." He hesitated, and I could hear the reluctance in his silence. "Anna, I'm not sure if that's a good idea." "Please," I interrupted before he could finish. "Just hear me out. If you don't want to stay afterward, fine. But I need to say this." Another pause stretched between us before he sighed heavily. "Okay. Tomorrow. Same coffee shop." The next day, I arrived early again, but this time my nerves were in overdrive. I'd spent half the night rehearsing what to say, going over every angle, but now it all felt like it had vanished. Nothing seemed right anymore. When Lucas walked in, he looked as exhausted as ever. The sight of him made my stomach tighten. His shoulders slouched under the weight of something invisible, and the dark circles under his eyes stood out even more than before. I almost lost my nerve right there. But I forced myself to sit up straighter, to smile. "Thanks for coming," I said quietly as he slid into the seat across from me. "Sure," he replied, his tone neutral but distant. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, suffocating, and I had to fight the urge to fill it with something meaningless. Then, finally, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "And you're right." Lucas blinked, looking surprised. "Right about what?" "About everything," I said, softer this time. "The way I've been acting, how I've treated you. I didn't see it before, but now I do. I've been selfish, Lucas. Honestly, I've been terrible. And I'm sorry." He stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Anna?" "No," I said, holding up my hand to stop him. "Let me finish. I don't know how I became this person, but I hate it. I hate that I made you feel like you weren't enough, like everything was on you. You didn't deserve that. I can't blame you for leaving." Lucas lowered his gaze, staring into his coffee as his jaw tightened. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I appreciate you saying that," he said, his voice steady. "But words aren't enough anymore, Anna. They never were." "I know," I said quickly, my heart racing. "I know I can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to the way it was. I don't even know if you want to come back. But I do know this, I want to change. For you, for the kids, and for me." For a moment, he didn't respond. The silence stretched, and I started to wonder if I'd already ruined everything. But then he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "I've heard you say things like this before," he said, his tone guarded. "But it never lasts. Why should this time be any different?" "Because I mean it this time," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "And if you give me a chance, I'll prove it to you." His eyes searched mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something that wasn't frustration or exhaustion. There was a flicker of something softer. Hope, maybe, or something close to it. "I don't know, Anna," he said finally. "But I guess, we'll see." I could hardly believe it when Lucas agreed to come back. There were no big declarations, no dramatic gestures. He just showed up at the front door one evening with a small bag in his hand and that same tired look in his eyes. "I'm giving this one more shot, Anna," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But this? This isn't forgiveness. It's a test, for both of us." I forced a smile and nodded like I completely understood, though my stomach twisted at the word test. Tests meant there was a chance of failing, and failure? That wasn't an option for me. At first, things seemed okay. Better, even. Lucas started coming home earlier. He played board games with the kids and seemed more present than he'd been in years. I worked hard, too. I bit my tongue when sarcastic comments came to mind, for the most part, and I made a real effort to listen when he spoke. Slowly, the heavy tension that had loomed over us for so long began to lift, at least a little. But then, cracks began to show. Because, well, I was still me. The first incident happened on a Saturday. Lucas had promised to fix the leaky kitchen faucet, but instead, he got caught up helping the kids build an elaborate cardboard fort in the living room. From the doorway, I watched him laughing and joking with them, the kids shouting, "Dad, look at this," every few minutes. At first, I tried to let it go, but as the minutes ticked by and the laughter grew louder, my irritation bubbled over. Finally, I stomped into the room, planting my hands on my hips. "Wow," I said, my tone sharp. "Must be nice to ignore all the real responsibilities and just play all day." The room went silent. The kids froze, and Lucas looked up at me, his smile fading. "Really, Anna," he said quietly. "I'm spending time with the kids. Isn't that what you've been nagging me about for years?" "It is," I snapped, crossing my arms. "But it'd be nice if you could balance that with, being an adult." Lucas didn't argue. He just stood up, grabbed his toolbox, and walked to the kitchen without another word. The look on his face said everything, disappointed, but not surprised. It started with something so minor, something that should have been nothing, laundry. Lucas had accidentally shrunk one of my sweaters, and I reacted like the world was ending. I stormed into the room, holding up the now doll-sized sweater. "Do you even pay attention to what you're doing?" I snapped. "How hard is it to read a tag?" Lucas's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. "I'm sorry, Anna. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I shot back, scoffing. "That's your excuse for everything." He didn't argue, didn't fight back. He just turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there with the ruined sweater in my hands and a sinking feeling in my chest. Over the next few months, I thought we were making progress. Things still felt fragile, sure, but I believed we were on the right track. That's why it hit me like a freight train when I came home one evening to find Lucas in the bedroom, packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't look up right away. When he finally met my eyes, his expression was unnervingly calm. "I'm leaving, Anna." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "What? Why? We were doing fine." "No," he said quietly, zipping up the suitcase. "You thought we were doing fine. I told you this was a test, and you failed." His words hit me like a slap. "Failed?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "What does that even mean?" "I've been trying, Lucas. You know I have." He shook his head slowly, his tone steady but distant. "Trying isn't enough, Anna. Not when you keep falling back into the same patterns. I can't keep doing this. I told you I needed respect, and instead, I got this." Tears welled up in my eyes, and for once, I couldn't muster a sharp reply. I stepped closer, my voice cracking. "Please, Lucas. Don't do this. Don't leave me. I'll change. I'll do better. I promise." He sighed, slinging the bag over his shoulder. "I've heard that before," he said softly, his voice almost apologetic. "But it doesn't last, Anna. It never lasts. And I can't keep waiting for it to stick." Desperation took over. I grabbed his arm, my tears flowing freely now. "Lucas, please. We have a family. Think about the kids." "I am thinking about them," he said, his voice breaking just slightly. "They deserve parents who aren't at each other's throats all the time. And you? You deserve someone who can handle you. Someone who can love you the way you are. I'm just not that guy anymore." He pulled away, walking toward the door. I followed him, sobbing openly. "Don't do this, Lucas. Please, don't leave." He paused at the door, his hand resting on the knob. When he turned to look at me, his expression was heavy with regret. "I'm sorry, Anna," he said quietly. "But the only solution left is divorce." And with that, he walked out, leaving me standing there in the doorway, my world collapsing around me. The papers arrived on a Tuesday. I stared at the envelope for what felt like hours before I finally worked up the courage to open it. The words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," stared back at me, cold and clinical. Seeing it in writing made everything real, more real than Lucas walking out the door with his suitcase. A wave of nausea hit me as I skimmed the neatly typed document. I braced myself for the worst, for a bitter battle over the house, the savings, and everything else we'd built together. I pictured lawyers tearing us apart piece by piece, turning our family into a courtroom spectacle. But what I found instead stopped me in my tracks. The terms weren't cruel or vindictive. They were kind. Noble, even. Lucas wanted the divorce, yes, but he wasn't trying to punish me. He was leaving me the house, so the kids wouldn't have to go through yet another upheaval. The savings were to be split equally. He even agreed to generous child support payments without so much as a fight. The only thing he insisted on was visitation rights. That was non-negotiable. Lucas wanted regular visits with the kids and to take them on weekends. When my lawyer asked if I wanted to challenge any of the terms, I felt a wave of guilt. How could I ask for more? Lucas had always been the steady one, even now, when things had fallen apart. "No," I said quietly. "I'll sign." The court proceedings were surprisingly uneventful. Lucas sat across the room, calm and unreadable. I tried to keep my focus on the judge as he reviewed the agreement, avoiding Lucas's gaze as much as I could. In just a few hours, it was over, no shouting matches, no dramatic arguments, no last-minute theatrics. Just the quiet legal end to everything we had built together. Walking out of the courthouse, I thought I might feel some kind of relief, but instead, there was only emptiness. I watched Lucas walk to his car without looking back, and it hit me, this was my life now. Alone. The months after the divorce passed in a haze. I threw myself into the day-to-day grind of managing the house and taking care of the kids, but everything felt heavier than before. The laughter that used to fill the house sounded forced now, almost mechanical. And the silence? It was deafening. When the kids were at school, or worse, when they spent weekends with Lucas, the emptiness seemed unbearable. I hated weekends now. Not just because I missed the chaos of having the kids around, though I did, but because I knew Lucas was out there, moving on, building a life without me. The thought haunted me. Was he happier now? Relieved, even, to be free of me? No matter how hard I tried to distract myself, the questions gnawed at me. One Sunday evening, the kids came home after spending the weekend with Lucas. I was halfway through folding laundry when my youngest burst into the room, eyes wide with excitement. "Mom! Guess what?" he exclaimed, dropping his backpack on the floor. "What?" I asked, pausing mid-fold. "Dad has a new friend," he said, grinning. "Her name's Emily, and she's really nice." I froze, the shirt slipping from my hands. "A friend?" I repeated, my voice tight. "What kind of friend?" My oldest, leaning casually in the doorway, chimed in. "Like, a lady friend, Mom. She was at Dad's house when we got there. She even made us pancakes this morning." My heart sank into my stomach. Pancakes. That was my thing. Every Sunday, I'd make pancakes for the kids while Lucas drank his coffee and tried to sneak extra syrup when he thought I wasn't looking. And now, some Emily had stepped in, taking over something that had always been mine. I forced a strained smile. That's Nice, sweetie. Did you like her? The youngest nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. She's really funny, and she has a dog. Dad said maybe we can bring the dog next time. I felt like I was going to be sick. Okay, that's enough, I said, sharper than I intended. Go put your things away and get ready for dinner. The kids didn't argue. They just scampered off to their rooms, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I gripped the counter tightly, my knuckles turning white. Emily. Of course Lucas would move on so quickly. Of course he'd find someone younger, prettier, more, everything. How long has this been going on? I muttered bitterly under my breath as anger bubbled to the surface. Was he seeing her while we were still married? Is that why he gave up so easily? The questions made my chest tighten, but it wasn't just anger. It was jealousy, betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness that refused to go away. Lucas had replaced me, and it felt like the final blow to whatever self-worth I had left. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Who was she? Where had she come from? How had she managed to slide so effortlessly into the life I used to have? The questions consumed me, haunting me day and night. I scoured social media, looking for any clue about her. I even tried asking the kids subtle questions, hoping they might offer more details. But it was like Emily existed in some impenetrable bubble, one I couldn't break into no matter how hard I tried. Frustrated and desperate to regain some sense of control, I decided it was time for a change. If Lucas could move on, why couldn't I? The thought of dating again was both terrifying and exhilarating. So, when an ad for a local speed dating event popped up on my phone, I took it as a sign. This is it, I muttered to myself, clicking the registration button. Time to show him what he's missing. The event was held at a trendy little wine bar downtown. I made sure to arrive early, dressed to impress in my favorite red dress and heels that pinched just enough to remind me I was trying. With my most dazzling smile firmly in place, I was ready to charm whoever sat across from me. It didn't take long for reality to hit. The first guy I met spent the entire 5 minutes rambling about Bitcoin. The second was so nervous he spilled his drink not once, but twice. By the time I reached the fourth contestant, who proudly announced that his mom still did his laundry, I was ready to throw in the towel. And then came David. He was the last man of the night, and the moment he sat down, something shifted. He had this effortless magnetism, tall, well-dressed, with an easy smile that felt genuine rather than rehearsed. He carried himself with a confidence that wasn't overbearing, just natural. So, he said, leaning forward slightly, his eyes sparkling with humor. How many disasters have you survived tonight? For the first time that evening, I laughed, really laughed. Too many to count, I replied. But you? You seem promising. The connection was instant. David was charming, witty, and genuinely curious about what I had to say. By the end of our 5 minutes, we were exchanging numbers and making plans to meet for dinner. I left the event feeling lighter than I had in weeks, convinced I'd finally found someone who could help me leave Lucas, and Emily, behind. When the big night arrived, I pulled out all the stops. I wore a sleek black dress, got my hair professionally styled, and even practiced a few witty one-liners in the mirror. I wanted to show David I wasn't just some lonely divorcee looking for validation. David greeted me with his signature smile as I walked into the restaurant. He looked just as polished and confident as I remembered. We ordered wine, shared appetizers, and fell into easy conversation. For the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself relaxing, laughing, and even forgetting about everything that had been weighing me down. But as the evening went on, something shifted. David became quieter, more thoughtful. By the time dessert arrived, he sighed and set his fork down, his expression calm but serious. Anna, he began, his tone gentle but firm. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, but I don't think this is going to work. My stomach dropped. What? Why? I thought we were having a great time. He hesitated, then leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. Look, I wasn't completely upfront with you. I'm a psychologist, and, well, I've noticed a few things. I blinked, completely caught off guard. A few things? What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said, his voice soft but steady, that you seem like a wonderful person. But I also see a lot of unresolved pain, anxiety, maybe even some resentment. Those things? They can make relationships really hard. My breath caught in my throat. Are you saying I'm a mess? No, he replied quickly, shaking his head. I'm saying you're human. But if you want something meaningful, something that can last, you have to work through the things that are holding you back. Right now? I think you're still carrying a lot of weight from your past. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen. His words cut through me like a knife, slicing straight through my defenses. And then, to my surprise, the tears started. At first, they came silently, a trickle I couldn't hold back. But before long, they turned into full, unstoppable sobs. She hated crying in front of anyone, especially someone she barely knew. But David didn't flinch. Instead, he reached across the table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. It's okay, he said gently, his voice calm and steady. You're not broken, Anna. You just need to heal. And it's not too late. That night, I went home feeling raw and exposed but, strangely, hopeful. David's words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I lay awake in the dark. He was right, I'd spent so much energy blaming Lucas, blaming Emily, blaming everyone but myself. It was time to stop running from the truth. The next morning, I made the scariest phone call of my life. I contacted a local therapist and booked my first appointment. The idea of opening up about my failures was terrifying, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was taking control of my life in a way that mattered. Determined to make real changes, I started keeping a journal, a simple suggestion from my therapist. At first, it was just a place to track my emotions, but as the days turned into weeks, the journal became something much deeper, a mirror that reflected my true self. I documented everything, my interactions, my thoughts, even the jokes I cracked. It didn't take long for uncomfortable patterns to emerge. Reading through the entries, I realized how often my humor took on a sharp, biting edge. What I'd always thought were harmless quips turned out to be thinly veiled jabs. Wow, I muttered one night, flipping through the pages. I'm basically a full-time stand-up comic with an audience that never signed up for the show. But the jokes weren't even the worst of it. I started to notice my relentless need to control everything. Whether it was nagging the kids about their chores or micromanaging my coworkers, I couldn't seem to let anything go. And the criticism? It was constant. Every small mistake someone made felt like an opening for me to swoop in, fix it, and throw in a pointed comment for good measure. In therapy, I started digging deeper into these tendencies. My therapist helped me connect them to my fear of vulnerability and insecurities I hadn't fully acknowledged. Some sessions left me drained, and I'd reread my journal afterward, feeling a knot of shame tighten in my chest. I came face to face with something I'd avoided for years, my sky-high, often unrealistic expectations of others. No one, not even Lucas, could have met the standards I set. Over time, therapy started to work. I became more mindful of my behavior. I caught myself before I snapped at the kids or tried to control a situation that didn't need my interference. I started apologizing when I was too harsh, and to my surprise, my relationships with the kids grew stronger. Even small conversations with neighbors and friends began to feel lighter, more natural. One night, as I sat with my journal reflecting on my progress, it hit me like a wave. Lucas had been right to leave. I'd always thought of the divorce as his failure, his inability to endure. But now, I saw it for what it really was, a boundary he had to set to protect himself. My hand trembled as I wrote the words in my journal, "Lucas didn't fail us. I did." The weight of those words was heavy, but at the same time, they brought me an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time, I truly understood the role I'd played in driving Lucas away. But instead of drowning in regret, I chose to see the divorce as something else, a turning point. It was the catalyst that had forced me to confront my flaws and grow. I still had a long road ahead, but I was finally heading in the right direction. I kept up with therapy, stayed consistent with my journaling, and made deliberate efforts to be a better mother, friend, and person. My life wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was better. It was quieter. It was more peaceful, and though I knew I could never rewrite the past, I found myself feeling grateful for the lessons it had taught me. They weren't weights to carry, but tools to guide me as I moved forward. Lucas had been my greatest loss, but in a way, he had also been my greatest teacher. He forced me to look inward, to face the parts of myself I'd tried to ignore. And for that, no matter how painful it had been, I would always be thankful.